Lesson 2, American Government, Principles of American Democracy. This lesson describes how the U.S. Constitution was created and explains the principles of American government. Familiarity with the principles and history of American democracy will help you better understand and participate in the political process. The lesson is divided into 3 parts. Principles of American Democracy, Section 1. We will now begin the first section of Lesson 2. During the Revolutionary War, it became clear that the United States needed to create a stronger government. After the war, in 1787, a convention was held in Philadelphia to decide what kind of government would be formed. For 5 months, many founding fathers, including James Madison, George Washington, and the convention's oldest member, Benjamin Franklin, debated and wrote the U.S. Constitution. This very important meeting is now known as the Constitutional Convention. Benjamin Franklin was one of the most important founding fathers. He was a U.S. diplomat, the first Postmaster General of the United States, and the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention. He also started the first free libraries and was the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac. Poor Richard's Almanac was a mix of practical information such as weather forecasts and household tips, and amusing stories, poems, puzzles, and proverbs. The U.S. Constitution sets up the government, defines the government, and protects basic rights of Americans. In this way, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. As the supreme law in the United States, the U.S. Constitution is above any state or federal law. The U.S. Constitution sets up a government with 3 branches: a legislative, an executive, and a judicial. The legislative branch is often called Congress and consists of a lower house called the House of Representatives and an upper house called the Senate. The executive branch is usually referred to as the President. The executive branch consists of the President, Cabinet, and numerous federal departments and agencies. The judicial branch is also called the courts. The courts consist of 2 levels of federal courts and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation. To stop one part of the government from becoming too powerful, the Founding Fathers gave each branch separate powers. This is called separation of powers. The Constitution also includes a system of checks and balances, which allows one part of the government to check another. For example, Congress can reject a treaty even though it was signed by the President, and the President can veto a bill for new legislation proposed by Congress. Another example is federal judges. The President appoints federal judges, but Congress must approve the candidate. Lastly, the Supreme Court can declare a law or executive action to be unconstitutional. In these ways, the separation of powers and the system of checks and balances work to limit the power of the government and to protect individual rights. To keep the national government from becoming too powerful, the Founding Fathers also created a federal system of government. The U.S. federal system has a central government at the top and separate state governments below. By creating a broader government, federalism encourages experimentation and keeps the government close to the people. Federal and state governments share some powers, such as collecting taxes, establishing courts, and making and enforcing laws. Other powers, though, belong to only the federal government or to the state governments. Under the Constitution, some powers granted to the federal government are the ability to print money, create an army, declare war, and make treaties. However, to protect states' rights and individual rights, the Constitution says that any powers not given to the federal government belong to the states. Some powers that belong to the states include providing schooling and education, providing protection, and providing safety. Protection is police departments, and safety means fire departments. States also give a driver's license and approve zoning and land use. Zoning and land use determines how land is used. This includes what types of buildings can be built and how they can be used. This is the end of Section 1. We will now practice the related civics questions. Question 1. What is the supreme law of the land? The Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Question 2. What does the Constitution do? Sets up the government. The Constitution sets up the government, defines the government, and protects the basic rights of Americans. Question 13. Name one branch or part of the government. Congress. One branch of the government is Congress. The three parts of the government are Congress, which is also called the legislative, the president, also known as the executive, and the courts, or the judicial branch. Question 14. What stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? Checks and balances. The system of checks and balances and the separation of powers keep one branch of government from becoming too powerful. Question 41. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the federal government. What is one power of the federal government? To print money. Some powers that belong to the federal government are the powers to print money, declare war, create an army, and make treaties. Question 42. Under our Constitution, some powers belong to the states. What is one power of the states? To give a driver's license. Under our Constitution, some of the powers that belong to states are to provide schooling and education, provide protection, provide safety, give a driver's license, and approve zoning and land use. Question 65. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? The Constitution was written. The Constitution was written at the Constitutional Convention. The Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention. Question 66. When was the Constitution written? 1787. The Constitution was written in 1787. Question 68. What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? He was a U.S. diplomat. Benjamin Franklin was a U.S. diplomat, the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, the first Postmaster General of the United States, and the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac. He also started the first free libraries. Principles of American Democracy, Section 2. We will now begin the second section of Lesson 2. James Madison was the most influential member of the Constitutional Convention and is considered the father of the Constitution. He was also a Federalist. Federalists believed a strong central government was necessary to unite and protect Americans and to properly conduct the nation's foreign affairs. Anti-Federalists, like the writer of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, believed that a big government would threaten states' rights and personal liberty. Anti-Federalists also worried that without the proper controls, the president could become as powerful as a king. 9 states had to accept the Constitution before the new government could be set up. In New York, anti-Federalist feeling was very strong. In response, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay wrote the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers is a collection of 85 essays that explain the new Constitution, the form of government it sets up, and the system of checks and balances. Although Madison, Hamilton, and Jay wrote all the essays, most were published anonymously under the name Publius. In the end, all 13 states voted for the new Constitution. It is unclear how much influence the Federalist Papers had on New York or other states, but the essays are still read today for their clear explanation of the Constitution. Once the new Constitution was accepted, a president had to be chosen. Because of his leadership during the Revolutionary War, George Washington had been made president of the Constitutional Convention. His support for the new Constitution also convinced many members to accept the new government. Therefore, Washington's reputation made him a natural choice for the nation's first president. In fact, some founding fathers would only accept Washington as the first president. As a result, in 1789, George Washington was elected first president of the United States by unanimous electoral vote. He served only 2 terms and then retired because Washington believed a president should not serve too long. In that way, he set an example that would not be broken until 1941. The Founding Fathers understood that the Constitution was not fixed, and therefore included procedures allowing for changes or additions to be made to the Constitution. Such changes are called amendments. So far, 27 amendments have been added to the Constitution. The last amendment was added in 1992. The first 10 amendments that were added to the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. The original Constitution defined and set up the government, but did not protect any basic rights. As an anti-federalist, Thomas Jefferson wanted a Bill of Rights to limit government power and guarantee certain individual and states' rights. However, James Madison believed the Constitution already offered enough protection. In fact, the Federalist Papers include an essay opposing a Bill of Rights. But to get anti-Federalist support for the new Constitution, the Federalists agreed to create a Bill of Rights once the Constitution was accepted. Therefore, in 1789, Madison wrote a Bill of Rights containing 12 amendments. However, at the time, only 10 were adopted, and in 1791, these first 10 amendments were added to the Constitution as the Bill of Rights. In 1972, almost 200 years later, an 11th Amendment from the original Bill of Rights was finally ratified as the 27th Amendment. This is the end of Section 2. We will now practice the related civics questions. Question 4. What is an amendment? A change or addition to the Constitution. An amendment is a change or addition to the Constitution. Question 5. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. Question 7. How many amendments does the Constitution have? 27. The Constitution has 27 amendments. Question 67. The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Name one of the writers. Madison. One of the writers of the Federalist Papers is James Madison. The three authors of the Federalist Papers are James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. However, most of the essays were published anonymously under the name Publius. Question 69. Who is the father of our country? Washington. The father of our country is George Washington. Question 70. Who was the first president? Washington. The first president of the United States was George Washington. Principles of American Democracy, Section 3. We will now begin the third section of Lesson 2. The First Amendment to the Constitution guarantees 5 freedoms. These freedoms are freedom of speech, also referred to as freedom of expression, freedom of religion, also referred to as freedom of worship, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition the government. Freedom of speech means a person may say or otherwise express any idea they wish. Freedom of religion allows someone to practice or not practice a religion. Freedom of assembly is the freedom to gather in a group. Freedom of the press allows newspapers to print whatever they want, including criticism of the government and its leaders. Freedom to petition the government means anyone can make a complaint or request to the government. The U.S. government is based on the idea of self-government. The Declaration of Independence states that men are born equal and a nation's citizens, not a king or other ruler, must be allowed to make their own laws. This is why the first 3 words of the Constitution are, "We the people." We the people expresses the idea of self-government. As Abraham Lincoln said, the U.S. is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The idea of self-government and individual freedom extends to the American economy. Since the first colonists came to America, immigrants have come here for economic opportunity. The economic system of the United States is based on free market capitalism. In capitalism, businesses are privately owned and operated for profit. In a market economy, what is produced and how much it costs is determined through free competition and supply and demand. In addition to being a foundation for self-government, the Constitution promotes the rule of law. The rule of law means everyone must follow the law. This includes leaders and government. In short, everybody must obey the law, and no one is above the law. In the words of one founding father, the United States is a government of laws and not of men. As a government of the people, there are many ways a citizen can become involved in their democracy. This participation is so important that many of the activities are protected by the Constitution. Some ways Americans can participate in their democracy are: vote, join a political party, help with a campaign, join a civic group, join a community group, give an elected official your opinion on an issue, call senators and representatives, publicly support or oppose an issue or policy, run for office, and write to a newspaper. This is the end of Section 3. We will now practice the related civics questions. Question 3. The idea of self-government is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. What are these words? We the people. The first 3 words of the Constitution are we the people. Question 6. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? Freedom of speech. The First Amendment allows for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition the government. Question 10. What is freedom of religion? Freedom of religion means you can practice any religion you want or not practice a religion. Question 11. What is the economic system in the United States? A market economy. The economic system in the United States is a capitalist economy or a market economy. Question 12. What is the rule of law? No one is above the law. The rule of law means everyone must follow the law, leaders must obey the law, the government must obey the law, no one is above the law. Question 55. What are 2 ways that Americans can participate in their democracy? Vote and run for office. There are many ways Americans can participate in their democracy. Americans can vote, join a political party, help with a campaign, join a civic group, join a community group, give an elected official your opinion on an issue, call senators and representatives, publicly support or oppose an issue or policy, run for office, and write to a newspaper. This is the end of Lesson 2. Return to the main page to practice the civics questions and dictation from the lesson.